Hey, what's up everyone? It is Lucy here. I am joined by Dan Crowd.
Hello.
Now today we're going to ask a very controversial question. Is Hideo Kojima too self-indulgent? Now the reason we are asking this question is obviously we have just come off the back of E3. We saw a whole bunch of Death Stranding stuff, mainly a new trailer and some tiny little bit of gameplay.
Some posters as well was in there.
Some stuff. But of course Kojima has a history of sort of drip feeding his audience his vision
Yeah.
bit by bit.
Yeah.
And often it's very cryptic. And so, you know, it led Dan and I to sort of ask the question, like, is there such thing as being too sort of involved in your own head and not giving enough to the audience?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put out our positions right here, right now. I don't think he's too self-indulgent. I think, in fact, he's not self-indulgent enough. Dan?
I think he's far too self-indulgent and needs to just rein it in. Just a bit.
Okay. Well, let's start with my position. I mean, Kojima is one of video games' very few auteurs, right? Now, there are so very few. I do think that we need to hold on to them. I mean, you always know a Kojima game, like from a non-Kojima game. Like it's an incredibly different proposition to any other AAA game around.
I guess it's like, it's hard to think of another single person in video games that has an imprint on their video games that you just know you're playing that game.
That's
Whereas
right.
like Naughty Dog, it's like a Naughty Dog game. Or like BioShock, maybe like Ken Levine, but I think...
Yeah, I mean, Ken Levine, I would call one of gaming's auteurs. Like Miyazaki is another one. But there are so very few. Like he has, as you say, he's got his imprint on these games, and his imprint may be getting wilder and wilder, but I think that's only for the better.
I think it's not so much his imprint, it's more the fact that he seems to be untethered now from boundaries. No one is saying, hey, Kojima, maybe let's just calm down, kind of work within these constraints. Because we got something like, my example is Metal Gear Solid 5, which was one of the best games to play, but one of the worst games for story I've ever seen in my life. I disliked that game so fully and within my being, the writing and the characters and everything in that. And that is something Kojima has gotten, I think, from game to game, progressively more self-indulgent, just throwing in lots and lots of just crazy stuff like that is just, it's just not that great, if I'm honest.
I mean, for me, like, I do take your point that you're a bit concerned that his writing is going to get more and more unwieldy, and I understand that. But I also have real faith that he's going to actually do something crazy and amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I think that what we've seen so far is very much him kind of putting little breadcrumbs down.
Yeah, agreed.
And what we're going to do is follow the breadcrumbs, and then he's going to reveal something that's going to twist everything that we thought on its head.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about the way he teases his games. It never really feels like marketing to me. It never feels, it's not cynical. It feels very much like, ooh, I'm the Riddler and I'm going to lay down these little clues and you're going to have to find them and piece it all together. And I do feel like he's challenging his audience. In fact, I've got a quote here. He said, the game has already begun. The game has already begun.
That's
I mean,
almost,
like, it's so
that could be from a Saw film.
It's true. It's straight from Jigsaw. A game of unraveling the mysteries of what kind of game Death Stranding will become. There are some answers to the questions I posed 2 years ago hidden in this trailer. These are for you, the fans, who have shown your tremendous ability to imagine, search for clues, and rack your brains to solve the mysteries. I mean, I love that.
That is like, that gets me so excited for that game.
Yeah.
Like the what could this game become kind of thing, because it sounds to me like Death Stranding is open-ended and hasn't really been settled on what it could be. I read this crazy theory that people think it's going to be an ARG within a game, and that to progress, everyone who plays it is going to have to solve clues from within the game in like the real world and to unlock the next bit, which would just be mental. But at this stage, we have no idea, and all the trailers we've seen so far have just been filled with shots of his new best friends and not really much else in there. Nothing that gives me a good idea of what this actually is gonna be. And I think that's the sticking point for me at this point.
Okay, I want to rewind a little bit because I do want to get onto the best friends thing, because I know that is something that bothers you, and I get it. But you know, I think that he does have a handle on what he's doing, and I think everything is very purposeful, and I think everything does have a meaning, much like a David Lynch film or episode of Twin Peaks. You know, there's always some kind of greater meaning. He's always in step with what that is, and you may not be. But you know, for example, the Twitter user noticed that the necklace that Lindsay Wagner was wearing resembles an ancient method of knot tying communication called quipu. An image depicting a translation of the code leads to the melody of the song Give Me an Answer by the Icelandic band Low Roar. This song was released almost a year ago, and it's just been sitting there having this like low-key hidden meaning towards Death Stranding.
Yeah, so I did a bit of digging on that. It's interesting because it was published like 10 months ago, I think. And immediately, if you look at the comments from 10 months ago, there's people being like, is this connected to Death Stranding? And it just somehow flew under everyone's radar, though. There's very select few people realized what it was. And then I don't know about this necklace thing. I don't know. Do you think this was intended?
I think it was absolutely intended. The way that I choose to lean into Kojima's way of promoting his games, again, is just going back to that maniacal puppet master.
Yeah, I guess that's the beauty of Kojima, because he never confirms or denies anything, really.
No,
so
he
it
doesn't.
just feeds into this like mania that is around his games.
Exactly, and you know, for me, it reminds me so much of PT. Like, PT ushered in a kind of collective movement of enjoying a video game and talking about a video game without knowing what the hell was going on. That I haven't seen since I was a little kid, like the pre-internet era.
Yeah.
Like before we could go online and look up wikis and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a word of mouth thing. It was a whole bunch of people jumping in and talking about it together and like feeding off ideas and bouncing ideas off one another. And that's what I love about it. Like he turns his games into, I feel like I'm already playing the Death Stranding game before actually even playing the Death Stranding game.
I guess that's a really good point that I haven't really thought about, is that this is part of Death Stranding the game. I'm looking at it as purely a piece of marketing for like luxury products, and I think that's what's holding me back and making me get all cynical about it, because that's pretty exciting if that's true, and it's just like this cool new way of him messing with games. Because if anyone's gonna do it, it's gonna be this dude. Like,
no, I mean, that's how I see it. But I also understand your points that you're a little concerned that he's untethered. I mean, that's a real theme of the game as well.
Yeah. I'm not so much untethered. I feel just more.
I mean, is the untethered?
Who knows what the strings mean? I went so deep.
I say that there's a theme of Death Stranding as if like I'm sure of that. No,
I was
not
so
sure.
deep on the subreddit. There was like someone had lined up Low Roar's album cover with the paintings with the strands, and they matched up, and I was like, oh my god, he's a genius. And then some other dude was like, nah, it just happens to be like a coincidence. And I was like, oh, but can he make coincidences? Is he that much of a genius? It's more about my concerns. It's not so much that he's untethered, it's that he's unconstrained, I guess.
Right.
Like, it seems like Sony is letting him run wild with this idea, because, I mean, why wouldn't you? When Kojima's like, hey man, I want to make an exclusive for your console, do whatever you want. And that feeds into what I started seeing around MGS5 with the replacement of David Hayter with Kiefer Sutherland, which was very odd and upsetting.
Yeah, and so your concerns are that he chooses people that he kind of, and I mean, he uses the word, and it's translated from Japanese, so obviously this isn't directly what he meant, but he does, well, I'm not sure. He does use the word that he's in love with his actors. Yeah,
and he uses the word muse a lot, and maybe it's the social media aspect of Kojima as well, of like him always talking about Mads and how much he loves Mads and Norman Reedus and stuff like that, and then Lindsay Wagner. And there's a blog post that is mildly strange to read about Lindsay Wagner, but it just feels like Kojima's getting funded to meet all these heroes, and I guess that's fine. But I just don't really at this point, from what I've seen, think that that's going to pay off in some way. I mean, he tweeted the other day that everyone's going to feel bad about him, about saying stuff like this, because once you see Reedus' performance, you're going to understand. And that harks back to Quiet, when people were like in MGS5, oh, Quiet shouldn't be dressed like that. Come on, man, it's 2017. he was like, "You're all gonna feel really bad when you find out why." And then it was like, she has photosynthesis.
Yeah,
Like, come on.
it wasn't exactly
Yeah.
the best.
Yeah, but again,
rationale.
I would never ever want him to stop doing this.
Right.
I would never be like, "Hey man, you can't do it." Go for it. Do whatever you want. Also, if you want to like get involved in the mania of Death Stranding and stuff, awesome.
So this
But-
is more coming from a place of love.
Absolutely, because
Yeah.
I adore Kojima's games. Metal Gear Solid 3 I've bought 6 times over, and it's like my favorite game of all time. I was a huge Metal Gear Solid fan, and then after MGS3, I've just gotten less and less interested because the stories have gotten more crazy. The games have become bloated messes with like 4 with its crazy amount of cutscenes, 5 with its just bat story and all those cassette tapes and just nonsense. But again, I'm still gonna buy his game and I'm gonna play it because I really do think he's gonna do something amazing. But at the same time, I don't know if he is a quote unquote genius. I don't think we can say he's like Death Stranding is gonna be like a genius game at this point.
Yeah, it's a big call, but we will just have to wait and see. Thank you so much, Dan,
Thank you.
for everything else, Death Stranding, and of course, Hideo Kojima. Stick with IGN.